us that we made the appointment.
No, it's important.
Especially on the LCG purview.
I don't. Someone was trying to tell me that. I said, "Might be right. I don't know, but that's not. I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
All right. At this time, we'd like to call the meeting to order. At this time, we'd like to ask Councilwoman Nanette Cook to lead us in a prayer and Councilman Lewis to lead us in the pledge.
Dear Lord, give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Keep us from short-sightedness and pettiness. Help us to make decisions that are good for all, and guard us from the blind side interest. Dear Lord, grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We'd like to welcome you to our meeting. Hope everyone had a great day. And before we get started, I have the fire chief up here to go over a couple of rules since the auditorium looks packed and keep everyone safe. Chief, go ahead.
Okay, everybody needs to have a seat. If there are no seats available, you can wait in the atrium and we'll call you when it's your turn to speak. You can't block the doors and you can't stand up along the wall. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that said, we'll go ahead and get this meeting started. Thank you, Councilwoman Annette Cook, and thank you, Councilman Lewis. Appreciate it very much for the prayer and the pledge. All right, we welcome you to the City Parish Council meeting. We, as your representatives in the Lafayette Consolidated Government, welcome your involvement and encourage your participation. This meeting is a public hearing. If you wish to address the council on any item on this agenda, we ask that you fill out a request form that's in the foyer. This request to address the council, blue card, must be filled out and submitted prior to the call of the agenda item, or you will not be given the opportunity to speak. If assistance is needed with submitting the request, staff will be available to help you. In the event a speaker has completed their comments prior to the expiration of their allotted 5 minutes, any remaining time therefore shall be forfeited. If you have materials you wish to submit to the council, please give those to Ms. Veronica Williams, Council Clerk, who's seated to my left. In the effort to allow everyone an opportunity to be heard, there is a 5-minute rule that will be in effect. We ask the speakers refrain from debating, personal attacks, or from making confrontational or derogatory comments. I am requesting that the first row to my left be used for media only. Lastly, food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium, and all phones, cell phones, electronic devices shall be silenced from this point moving forward. I'm also requesting that anyone who approaches the council, please state your name and title for the official record. Meeting procedures are by resolution and not by Robert's Rules of Order. Documents, including the agenda, ordinances, resolutions, and minutes related to this meeting are posted online at LafayetteLA.gov, or you may refer to the web address on the top of the agenda as well. Council encourages your involvement, participation by volunteering for boards and commissions. If you're interested in finding out which board suits your interests, we ask that you call 291-8800 or pick up a pamphlet at the door. We'll now move to chair announcements. Just to let everyone know, this meeting is being held as a special meeting because the publication requirements for a regular meeting were not met by our official journal. Item 18, Appeal of Planning Commission Action, Walter J. Despot, Senior Property, is being deferred per the appellant's request until September 18th. That's item 18 being deferred until September 18th. Item 29, introduction of ordinance number 151, 2018, relative to a 2017-18 capital budget revision, will be pulled from the in-global list for a separate vote and discussion, as Public Works has proposed an amendment to correct verbiage to line item names and divide funding into separate line items, keeping the total amount the same. At this time, we'd like to wish Councilmember Jay Castile a happy birthday, which he will be celebrating on September the 2nd. Happy birthday, Mr. Castile. Yeah. Would you like to comment on how young you're going to be? Nah? You good? You know it's just a number, right? It's just a number. Yeah. Let's keep it right there. All right, also moving along, item 12, ordinance 136-2018, Camellia Boulevard rezoning is being deferred until the September 18 meeting, and that is at the request of Development and Planning. Item 12. Item 8, ordinance 132-2018, East Simcoe condemnation is being deferred indefinitely. That's item number 8. This time, I'm going to move right along to council announcements. Is there any council announcements? Councilman Terrio.
If you can include Mr. Robideau, please.
Okay. Mr. Robideau, your mic is hot, sir.
Mr. Robideau, just to let y'all know, he and I had a discussion before the meeting. I was asking him if Bernhard had been requested or asked to come before the council and give a presentation, and I'm going to let Mr. Robideau respond to what he told me.
Certainly. It's my understanding that they have asked to come before the council, and it was recommended that once they finalize their report, to re-ask, and at that point in time, the council will consider when's the best time to put them on the agenda.
And it's very possible that it could be 2 weeks from tonight if the report comes in on time?
Yeah, I mean, I think their goal, when I spoke to them the last time, was that they would have something by the end of the month. I think I said that probably a couple of weeks ago. I talked to them maybe three or 4 weeks ago. So if, in fact, they do get it by the end of the month, then the request would be to, I guess, be on one of the September agendas.
And as I mentioned to him, they have been to a number of places in Lafayette providing some presentations, so naturally some were questioning when they were going to appear before the council and the public. So if you get any additional information, sir, by all means, share it with us.
They certainly have asked, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Okay. Not seeing any other council discussions. At this time, I'll refer to the Executive Mayor President's report and recognize Mayor President Robideau at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a proclamation I'd like to read. Is Ryan in the audience somewhere? There you are, Ryan. Come on up. I have a proclamation that reads, whereas Chef Ryan Trohan, executive chef at Blue Dog Cafe in Lafayette, was one of 12 chefs competing for the title of Louisiana Seafood King on Tuesday, June 9th, 2018 at the Cajun Dome Convention Center. And whereas Chef Trohan's winning and creative dish featured crackling crusted red snapper, his favorite Gulf fish, with pickled crawfish tails, buttermilk chili consomme, spring vegetables, burnt leek oil, fermented cream, and bowfin caviar. And whereas with the win at the Louisiana Seafood Cook-Off, Chef Trohan advanced to represent Louisiana in the Great American Seafood Cook-Off. And whereas on Saturday, August 4th, 2018 in New Orleans, Louisiana Chef Trohan competed against chefs from Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Massachusetts, Mississippi, New Hampshire, New Mexico, South Carolina, and Texas. Whereas at the end of the competition, Chef Trohan and his crackling crusted red snapper dish took home top honors to be named the Great American Seafood King. And whereas Chef Trohan became only the third chef from Louisiana to win the Great American Seafood Cook-Off and the only Louisiana chef from outside of New Orleans. And whereas over the next year, Chef Trohan will represent Lafayette, the state of Louisiana, and Blue Dog Cafe all across the country in his duties as Great American Seafood King. And whereas this honor will bring great national attention to Blue Dog Cafe, Lafayette, and the wonderful cuisine of our area. Whereas I know that Chef Trohan will serve as an ambassador for our area and represent us well in promoting our food culture, which is a key cultural economic driver and part of the CREATE initiative. Now, therefore, I, Joel Robideau, Mayor President of Lafayette Consolidated Government, do hereby proclaim September 2018 as Eat Local Month and encourage citizens to support our local restaurants and chefs like Chef Trohan. Ryan, if you'd like to just say a few words, congratulations.
Thank you for having me here today. It has been a great honor, and it's been a very good ride. I think I've worked a lot over my career to shine light on locality and sustainability within our local food culture. has been something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and working with the Louisiana Seafood Board in order to branch out from the state and in order to promote our local cuisine. Thank y'all for having me here. It's been an honor working with the Rodrigues and being a part of Blue Dog. As everybody knows, that is a cornerstone to our culture, and what their dad has done for art, I'm looking forward to being able to continue that through our cuisine and showcasing the art on a plate. So.
Thanks, Ryan. And one of the other folks to win, you may have heard of him, is John Besh, that had won a number of years ago. So you're drawing in some pretty elite company. I've got a key to the city, and I'm going to give you the proclamation. And is Ken Veron here for Eat Local? Ken, there you are. We've got the proclamation for you also.
Yep.
I know we have a long meeting, Mr. Chairman. That's all for me.
All right. Thank you so much. Congratulations once again. That sounded really good.
I don't know if Jacques was here, Rodrigue or not, but maybe could have
Yeah.
brought us some of those beignets.
Yeah, that would have been really good. I was curious where he gets his cracklings from, you know? You get that from Scott, or? We got Boudin, we can make it crackling, you know? All right. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Moving right along, we'll move to the public hearing. Proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. At this time, I now officially open the public hearing for citizen input on any matter related to the proposed fiscal year 17-18 budget. The 5-minute rule is in effect.
We have no speakers on the fiscal year proposed budget.
Okay. All right. We got a speaker, Mr. Terrio.
We do have a speaker, Andrew Duhon.
Okay. Okay.
I think I got placed in the other stack, so I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm Andrew Duhon. Most of you know me, if not all of you know me, from my service with LUS over the years. I worked for LUS for almost 30 years, retired about a year and a half ago. And I was here for the budget hearing last Tuesday, and I sort of wrung my hands over whether I'd comment about this issue or not, but I feel like I've gotten to a place where I think I can discuss it a little more lucidly now. And that is the issue of LUS Fiber and the separation of LUS Fiber and LUS. I was conflicted because I was here for when LUS Fiber project started up. I saw it at its infancy, at its development, all the wars it went through, and after 10 years of LUS being in operation, I kind of figured that at some point in time we would see the next step, that we would maybe have a separation between LUS and LUS Fiber. But when I look at the reorganization, that's why I was somewhat conflicted on whether I'd respond at the budget hearing the other day. But after thinking about it, what I see is a hastily conceived effort to try to separate LUS Fiber from LUS, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. All that was done was we put at the top of the budget a director with an insufficient salary, by the way, which I understand that the administration says they're going to come and find and get the research done to establish what is an appropriate salary for that position. But what they did basically is just put a director at the top, put a secretary, and said, this is your reorganization. Gentlemen and ladies, if I'd brought a reorganization like that to you at that time, I think you would have said, Mr. Duhon, go back and do your work. There's a lot of things that need to be done to establish those two as separate entities, especially now that you have two directors, and there are certain parts of the organization that I feel are going to be beholden to either one or both of those directors. Example would be, and this is an area which I'm very familiar with because it was under me at the time, the is customer service. You have customer service agents that deal with LUS issues and some that deal with LUS Fiber issues, but you have supervisors that are intertwined, and the head supervisors and the management even has some footing in each one. Now, granted, there's allocations of dollars because LUS Fiber has to do everything on its own without subsidization from LUS. So there's allocations that take care of those types of things, and proper transfer of funds. But I think when you look at the way they want to separate this with the LUS Fiber director and an LUS director, the operational issues will start to become they'll become paramount. How do you operate these two separate entities that are now torn apart with the staffs that you have today? Another issue would be IT. Right now, they share IT resources. How are you going to do that? And there's probably a lot of other issues that haven't been developed properly. And that's my whole point, I think, is that I just think that it's hastily conceived. I think there's a rush to do a lot of things right now without thinking about what the impact are going to be on future generations, not just generations of fiber employees, but fiber users. So I implore you to really just take a closer look at this. I don't think it's been well thought out, and I definitely am in opposition of the reorganization as it stands, excuse me, now. I'm also in opposition of the sale/privatization/management contract, but that's a discussion for another time. I really think that it'd be more prudent for me to hear what the assessment from Bernhardt turns out to be and come back to you and tell you what my opinion of it is at that time. But just let it be said that today, I think the thing that's in the budget now with the organization or reorganization of fiber and LUS, I don't think it's done properly, so I just ask you to oppose it.
All right. Councilman, Mr. Mayor Robideau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Andrew, I appreciate certainly all your years of service that you gave at LUS, and so I certainly respect your opinion. I disagree with it, but I respect and I disagree with it in the point that it's certainly not rushed. There is an organization, a reorganization that is underway for fiber that was presented to us a fairly long time ago. It is still under civil service review for a lot of those jobs, and at the end of the conversation, I felt like it was most important for whoever is going to be the director of LUS to be the one that was able to decide what that organization and that reorganization looked like. It shouldn't be left up to us to then bring someone in and say, hey, here's the organization that we want you to run. And if they felt like there needed to be some changes, we would have just gone through a reorganization. So I think what it does is it allows this director to come in to assess the talent pool that they have and the organizational structure that exists, and then they will be able to make that decision that they think best fits Lafayette going forward. So that was the reason that that we are proposing that it be separated at this point, and to give the director, the new director, the opportunity to organize it the way that they think it's supposed to be run.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilman Terrio.
Matter of fact, excuse me, they just touched on where my next question was, if you could include the administration.
Sure.
Just to clarify on what you guys had brought up, at this point in time, could you give us a definition or some clarity as to where LUS Fiber is at this point? Through the budget, we have gone through a process of, I guess you could call it a separation. I guess the question I want to pose to you, sir, is that is LUS Fiber separated only by the budget, or is it something that the LPUA has to approve by a vote? Do we know that yet?
I want to refer to legal.
Yeah, I may ask Paul that, but it's my understanding that that it is, to answer your question, we are separating it out as its own budgetary division, department, I should say. It's currently a division as its own budgetary department that has its own director. And I'll defer to legal on whether or not that requires a certain vote or not.
Okay, if you could include Mr. Ascott. Mr. Ascott, I guess basically, since it's being done in budget, does the council, the LPA, or the full council have any kind of vote or say-so on the split of fiber?
Do you still have your charter?
Yes, I do.
I recall, I don't know the number, but under the charter, the powers of the mayor president includes the power for reorg. And that would be essentially what I think y'all are talking about, the reorganization of the utilities department to create a separate department for LUS Fiber. That would fall under his powers under the charter to do so.
From what I read under the existing charter is that LUS Fiber is a part, or when the vote was made to establish fiber, it would establish fiber with the backing of LUS. When the vote was made for fiber a long time ago. So in the current charter, now, the new charter that's coming out, I think the council and the public are going to need to be looking at in the future, does have a new section in there to separate fiber, but this existing charter does not.
Well, I think what you're referring to is, are you referring to the current charter under the utility system?
The current charter under utility system, yes, sir.
And I think there was an amendment to the charter that was done in 2004, I believe it is, where there was a division of communication services created within the division of utilities. That is the division, my understanding, is what we commonly call LUS Fiber. Okay. So currently under the charter, there is one department, but with a division called the Division of Communication Services. The mayor president, in engaging in his power on the ability to reorg, can move that division out of the utilities department and create its own department, so to speak.
So in essence, to shimmy this all down for the public, it can be done at budget time and the council will not vote on it.
Well, I think the council is going to vote on it because it's
Based on budget.
It's in the form of an organization in an ordinance, correct, Ms. Toops? It's in the form of an ordinance that is subject to council vote and approval.
Okay, so through the budget proposition and what's happening through the budget is the vote for the separation of fiber?
Well, the answer is, I guess, yes and no, in the sense that it is a necessary component part, absolutely, within the ordinance, that in the reorg, there is budget items that need to be reorged as well. And all subject to council approval in that ordinance.
At budget, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. That's all I have. Thank
All right. Not seeing any other discussion at this time. With there being no additional comments on the proposed budget, I'm now closing the public hearing on the budget. And now we will move to the section of this meeting, comments from the public. Ms. V, how many speakers?
We have 36 speakers.
36 speakers, okay. This portion of our meeting is an opportunity to make your voice heard before the council, the administration, and the public. This is the time to speak about topics that are not included as agenda items. As I noted earlier, requests to make comments specific to agenda items should be made prior to the call for that agenda item by completing a request to address the council blue card. We request that all matters regarding specific city parish employees be directed to the administration and that it not be addressed at this public forum. We as a council have a concern for the privacy and protection of government employees. With that said, however, if your concern is not resolved in either an expeditious or satisfactory fashion, there are other avenues which can be pursued, and we ask that you follow up with the council office. Please note, this evening, confrontational statements and/or threats will not be tolerated, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a civil manner and with the same common courtesy that you would expect of others. Very important. 5-minute rule is in effect. First speaker.
First speaker, Marie Delahousie Diaz.
Hold your applause, please.
Hi, I haven't done this in a very long time, and I passed out twice in law school, so if I fall, just ignore me. My name is Marie Diaz, and when they said earlier you had to have a title, I thought, oh, great, I have no title. I guess you could call me mom and chief at my house, and library patron extraordinaire. I'm here to talk about the library. They've had kind of a tough year this year with the millage and now this story time that's been so controversial apparently the last 24 hours. We have a pretty deep history with the library, my family. I have 4 kids. I know you won't believe it. My oldest is 31. We've been going to the main branch since she was born. She kind of grew up in the children's department. If you remember the old pit where all the kids threw up whenever they could, that's where we spent all our time. My kids had the opportunity, because of the library, to learn who they were from reading, from hearing speakers, from being involved in organizations. The library put together clubs and anime clubs and performance troupes and planning groups, arts and craft stuff, just all those things. They learned how to take and be grateful. They learned how to give back by volunteering. They worked at the summer programs. They were reading buddies during the school year with little kids. They loved it. They loved the library. The library gave my kids a space to find themselves, to learn who they were, to learn how to be themselves, how to relate to people, how to meet people who were different from themselves. They learned how to find community in a city that when you're 12 looks really big and kind of scary. But they were able in the library to make it small, to make it something they could handle. In the years that I've been in the library, checking out books, returning late books, paying overdue fees, paying more overdue fees, paying more overdue fees, Lafayette has changed. The city is, let me rephrase that. Lafayette hasn't changed. I think people have started to notice the diversity that exists in Lafayette. We've been exposed to more things than for sure I was when I was a kid growing up in Brobridge. We need to make space for each other in that community. We need to learn how to recognize each other, how to see each other's gifts and talents and flaws, and how to meet each other. The library for us, and I think for a lot of the people here, is such a safe space to do that in. It's a place where you can put yourself out as far as you can, and then you can hold yourself back once you reach the end of your leash, your envelope. This story time that's caused so much controversy is just an opportunity for kids, older kids, younger kids, almost babies, to see each other, to experience something they've never seen before, and to learn how to relate to it. There's no obligation to do that. Parents don't have to come. They don't have to bring their kids. But for those parents who do want their kids to see new things, who do want their kids to meet someone who's different, and to have a parent with them to explain. One of the things that I loved was being able to take my kids home and put my own spin on what we had experienced. In the library, parents are always welcome. There was never a time when it was like, I'm sorry, you can't come in. You're too old for this room. I couldn't get through the little door that they just put in, but 30 years ago, I could have. We have to encourage our kids to meet people who are not like them, because that's so important to making this world fit together in a way that it really has to right now. Thanks.
I appreciate the applause. We have 36 speakers. Can we just hold it, not being disrespectful, Appreciate it, and everybody has emotion in here tonight, but in order to keep the meeting moving, I ask that you hold your applause. Thank you. Next speaker.
And Mr. Chair, correction, we have 39 speakers. I had
Been more reason not to clap. No, sorry.
I had the list in the court. The other 3 courts were turned in timely, but I had the list in preparation for your call.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
the 3 names were added timely.
Yes, ma'am.
The next speaker is Melanie Brevis.
Okay. Easy.
Good evening, Council. My name's Melanie Brevis. I live in Broadmoor, District 8, and I am here to voice my support for the Drag Queen Storytime that the library is doing on October 6th, and more importantly, for the library as a whole. The library is an innovative, progressive beacon here in Lafayette. Its job is not to make everyone comfortable with every single program. In fact, if we were supposed to come to consensus or vote on every single library offering, we'd probably have no programs at all, or no books for that matter. Someone shared a quote today that a truly great library has something in it to offend everyone. This is not an issue of whether everyone can agree about every single program just because it's funded by tax dollars. It's only one of about 80 programs happening at the library in October. There's stuff in the library that I'm not too keen about my tax dollars funding, but I'm sure someone else is enjoying it. And so I would say to all those making a fuss about this program, if you don't like it, don't go, or just pretend it's not happening. I do the same thing when I go to the library and I see books by Joel Osteen and Rush Limbaugh. I just pretend they're not there and I go find something I do like. One of the library's best features is to keep this community on the winning side of innovation, openness, and diversity. When they are doing that in ways like hosting a maker fair or maker spaces, we may not notice because this is something that may only appeal to a few people, but yet is not controversial. But this story time is in that same vein. It is introducing diversity, and more importantly, it's helping young kids see that differences aren't scary. How someone chooses to dress or how they choose to identify does not need to be scary. Mayor Robideau said in his statement that the library's internal programming needs to be appropriate and serve the needs of Lafayette. Well, on the first point, I will argue that other places are deeming this appropriate. In our own state, and even in Texas, which isn't really seen as a hotbed of progressivism. So if Houston, Minneapolis, New Orleans, and a host of other cities in this country can offer these programs without judgment and without deeming them as inappropriate, why can't we? We're not the first and we're hopefully not the last city to do this. As far as serving the needs of Lafayette, well, there is already plenty of people ready to show up and support this event. One can wordsmith or argue about the true definition of need, but the library is meeting a request, a need in this community for more exposure to diversity. And if anything, all of these protests and the ugly comments on Facebook have simply highlighted the fact that we need more open-mindedness and more diversity in this community to combat the hate and the fear. And this story time is one way to accomplish this. Further, libraries are institutions of free expression and have a responsibility to uphold those values. The fact that our mayor is looking at censoring and canceling an event solely based on public protest is a classic case of censoring a program. And in our fight to get that message across, we're seeing a repeat of history, just with a different group in the hot seat. Women suffragists were condemned for trying to win the right to vote, which was a radical idea at the time. African American and civil rights workers were condemned from trying to desegregate schools, which was also a radical idea. In more recent decades, women have had to fight for equal rights in school sports and the military, among other things. And each time it's the same. There's a big uproar, sometimes for years, decades, centuries. Protesters come forth with their scientific, or more likely their own moralistic reasoning for why these groups should not be accepted. And then, over time, their protests become antiquated, and the change that they were fighting against becomes the accepted way of doing things. So for all of those protesting this event for whatever reason, please remember this. History does not look kindly on those who look to shut out people, whether because of their gender, their race, their religion, or their identity. When you try to rise up against a group of people who have shown no hate, no history of violence against anyone, and you tell them that they do not belong in a public space, you will not be viewed kindly in the history books. Look at any protest photo from the 1950s or 60s over school integration. Look at those people holding signs and yelling terrible things simply because a group wanted equal, inclusive educational opportunities. Those protesters are not remembered kindly by history. I ask you, as members of the council, to please let the library set their own programming. It has done an excellent job with community outreach and partnership, and it has a proven track record of well-received programs. Thank you.
Next speaker is Haley Valdez.
Good evening, Council and Mayor President. My name is Haley Valdez. I've been a resident of Lafayette for the last 20 years. I came here for UL. I stayed because I love the fact that this is a city of diversity. Lafayette is the city that celebrates Festival International. We're the city that has the Hindu Festival of Color, Holi, every spring. We're the city that embraces our Cajun French heritage. We have Catholic Mass on the Bayou. We have Lafayette Pride. We have Black History Month. We are so much a progressive city, a diverse city, and that's what makes us strong. So even if it isn't your way of life, you cannot boast that we are a progressive city if we are discriminating. So my question that I'm asking people as far as what's the issue? Why are we having a problem with this? Why is there so much clamor and protest? Is the issue the venue or the process? Libraries have been traditionally the places where fixed mindsets are challenged. There's the source of knowledge for everybody. You learn things. Libraries are the safe space for our kids to learn, to explore, to grow, to try new things that maybe don't work, and to figure out what they're going to do. So I don't think it's the venue. Is it the subject matter? Is the subject matter of accepting others, even if they're different from you, so bad? I don't think so, because I can't think of any parent that would want their child who is unique, something that we always stress with children, that you are special, you are unique, you are cherished. I can't think of any parent that would want their child to be bullied for being different. So is it the speaker? Is the issue the speaker? The message that's being delivered through the speaker? What if it was somebody in costume, somebody in theater? What if this was Halloween? Would the same rules apply? What if the speaker was Hispanic or female or openly lesbian? Because in times past, and sometimes still today, those groups are discriminated against from delivering their message. It's just a different way of life. It's just a different person. It's not wrong, they're just different. So because of that, I'm urging the council, please don't discriminate against somebody just because it isn't your way of life. Let's keep Lafayette strong and diverse. Thank you.
John Francois. John Francois? Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor President, and ladies and gentlemen of the City Parish Council, my name is John Francois. I'm a citizen of Lafayette the last 20 years. I should have been here last open mic because what I have to say is about the monuments. I'm for it, and here's a little history lesson. About 150 years ago, a great war began that divided families and states and tore this nation apart. The causes of this war were many. Time constraints prevent me from listing them, but for people who have never learned history, they have accepted the false narrative that this war was fought over slavery. Such a wrong answer only denigrates the deaths of the thousands of soldiers, both Yankees and rebels, who fought in this conflict. This fight was over the right of a state to secede from a union with a government overtly hostile to the rights of certain states and hostile to the aims of its founders. Mr. Lincoln felt that it was his duty to preserve this union, and would declare war to accomplish his aim. The issue of slavery and the freeing of slaves became a secondary goal of this war after 2 years of bloody fighting. His armies were losing battles, and the people in the North were growing weary of not winning. Lincoln decided he needed a moral objective to justify his continuation of the war he started. So he issues his executive order of January 1863, the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, which, as an illiterate person can tell you, did not free any slaves in the North where it existed, nor in any of the border states, and certainly none in the South. At this point, let's back up for a little economic history. All colonies that became states had originally accepted the institution of bondage, but as it turned out, the economy of the northern states, as it developed in the early 1800s, did not work well with such labor. It better suited factory owners to use immigrants because such labor was far more economical. These workers didn't have to be housed, clothed, or fed by them. As a consequence, bondage in the North mostly disappeared for lack of efficiency. Therefore, Mr. Lincoln's war, which, as he had put it from the very beginning, was to preserve the Union, and only later did he sign an executive order for the secondary goal of abolishing slavery. But no amount of facts or reasoning will change the minds of those who choose to believe that the war was about slavery. It suits their agenda to act or to pretend that it was. Which brings me to the subject of this little speech, the question of Confederate monuments. I know I'm getting tired of it as much as you are. But what one needs to understand is that by the end of the war between the states in 1865, the South was devastated physically, economically, and financially, and that it remained so for over half a century. It took a long time before the South had enough money to spend money on monuments to honor their fallen soldiers, because after all, Northern groups had already erected their memorials all over the country. So by the time Southern groups in the late 1800s and early 1900s had the finances to erect their own memorials to their fallen sons, these Southern monuments, ironically, came to be seen by some as symbols of white supremacy. Go figure. The Mouton statue, a statue erected to a Southern soldier, is looked upon by some, using their own words, as a symbol of pain and oppression. They continuously nagged this council to have it removed. But to other people, the same statue is also a symbol of the soldiers who fought heroically to protect his homeland from the rapacious invaders sent by the North to lay waste to the South. Invaders who burned the homes and slaughtered the livestock and destroyed the crops and other food sources of the people who tried, at first peacefully, to form a new government and a new country, which they felt they had the right to do. Council members, as I conclude in the few seconds left to me, we should not heed the voices of those who look backward, who don't know, who disregard the true facts of history. They have their own agenda, which is apparently to sow discontent upon this city. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jean Menard. After Ms. Menard is Jeff Case.
Good evening. I am also here to discuss the monument, but I would like to mention that the library situation is not very different because we are both looking for inclusion. That is the key word here. Why do we need to draw lines and say that we don't accept certain people? We are all people. We all want love. One group is judging based on skin color, and the other one might be talking about how people dress or identify, but inclusion is still the key here.
Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jean Menard. I had a prepared statement for tonight, and then I came to this council meeting last month and sat in front of some people who were complaining the entire time we were discussing moving the monument. And it occurred to me that in 2018, we are still in a place where some people are in denial about facts and truth. This monument that is downtown is a symbol of white supremacy. It's in the newspapers if you go back and search. It is a fact, as is the Civil War being fought about slavery, also a fact. And we definitely still have a problem with racism. You might have a black friend. That doesn't mean you're not a racist. We live in a world where black men and women make 60 cents on the dollar. That's not right. We live in a world where African Americans accrue less than 1/10 of the wealth of white Americans. Why is that? Why do we have neighborhoods full of African Americans still in the areas where red lines were drawn, where that was the only place that they could live during segregation? It's still alive and well. It's alive and well in this room right now. People are judging other people, hating other people for how they look, how they dress. It just boggles my mind that we are still denying facts in 2018. It's completely unacceptable. We teach our children to love each other, to accept each other, to help one another. But hate is growing. Hate is so prevalent right now, and it's so easy to blame other people and to say, oh, well, you know, they're fine. A black person was president. There's no racism. And that's so far from the truth. And I think if everyone looks inside their heart, they know that. We need to move into the future. The past cannot be erased. It will never be erased. But people were treated worse than animals. And we have a statue downtown to commemorate that because we want to remember a war that we lost over keeping people like farm animals. That's not something to be proud of. I'm not proud of it. I hope you're not proud of it either. Let's move forward. Let's include everyone, regardless of color, regardless of how they identify, regardless of how they dress. We're all people. We all want to be loved for who we really are. Let's be the city that makes the change and says we are going to move forward together. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Jeff Case, and he will be followed by Kirk Piccioni.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Case, 9th District. I'm the president of the board of my church, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lafayette, one of many partner organizations with Move the Mindset. On behalf of my church and myself, I speak to support Move the Mindset, and I urge this council and the city and parish of Lafayette to stand up on the right side of history and move the Alfred Mouton statue from its current location on public land to a place of historical context. My family has roots here in Louisiana, going back before the Civil War, and several of my ancestors fought on the side of the Confederacy. I have a letter from one of them, George M. Dixon of Downsville, Louisiana, to his sister during the time of the war. From this letter, I think he was basically a good man. I honor his memory. That is my history. I believe the same about many others who were on the side of the South in the Civil War, that they were basically good people. But relating to slavery, they all were on the wrong side of this war and of history, including my ancestors. Every person ever alive has done good things and bad things, been in the right and been in the wrong. Most of them still deserve honor, but we must be honest about the good and the bad that was done. I personally believe that we actually disrespect our ancestors if we are not honest about the good and the bad, as we disrespect ourselves if we do not try to be honest about ourselves. That is history. Wars and the events leading up to them are complex. And in some wars, it's hard to say definitively who was right and who was wrong. But in other wars, it's clearer. Take World War II. Although most Germans are wonderful people with outstanding qualities, it is impossible not to say that Germany as a nation was in the wrong in most of their causes and actions in World War II. This does not make most of its citizens bad people individually in most ways. Sometimes some of the people may get brainwashed by their leaders. This does not take away the many good things in Germany's past history. Germany has since stood up and been honest about the bad and the good in their history. Likewise, in the Civil War, the Confederacy, with its cornerstone of slavery, was in the wrong in that cause. I'm going to be honest now about my history, our history, relating to slavery. I'm going to say the word we, since it was my ancestors. We were wrong. We, the Confederacy, were in the wrong. We, the Confederacy, were on the wrong side of history. The Lost Cause movement is also on the wrong side of history. Gaines M. Foster, professor of history at LSU, said, "The Lost Cause and the monuments that emerged from it sought to vindicate the Confederacy. The White South's memory of the war claimed that soldiers fought for the defense of their homes and families. The Lost Cause also proclaimed secession to be legal, denied the centrality of slavery to the war, ignored the evil inherent in it, and over time romanticized it. The monuments thereby celebrate not just the veterans, but the Confederacy and, despite the attempt to deny it, its cause, slavery." The monument and the Lost Cause were as much about the present as the past, offered a vision of the proper social order, one in which the lower classes deferred to leaders, and African Americans remained subservient to whites. In the same decades in which most of the monuments went up, the White South created a repressive racial order based on segregation, disfranchisement, lynching, and other forms of white racial violence, end quote. That is what this statue represents. On behalf of my church, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lafayette, and myself, I urge this council and the city and parish of Lafayette to be honest about our history and the good and the bad of it, and to stand up on the right side of history and move the Alfred Mouton statue to a place of historical context. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Hold the applause.
Kurt Piccioni, and he will be followed by Jackie Phelps.
Good evening, council members. My name is Kirk Piccioni, and I am a citizen of District 8. And I'm here to also make my voice heard with regard to moving the Mouton statue. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, I'm not African American. Also, my last name is not Mouton. So you may ask, why do I even care? And for a long time, I asked myself that question. And my conclusion was, I don't really have a dog in this fight, do I? But I was at Mass the other day, and my priest was talking about the sad decline of empathy in today's society. Not sympathy, but empathy. And it got me to thinking about what it would mean to empathize with a person of color on this issue. I wondered what it would be like to step out of my own shoes and step into the shoes of a black person in today's South. I pay taxes like everyone else. My money supports maintaining the government and government property, just like everyone else's. And yet, when I go into government buildings, there is a monument there to someone who fought to enslave my race. When I go to court seeking justice, there is a flag flying there that represents the cause of enslaving my race. And when I go to a public park, I am greeted by an icon to someone who fought for that cause. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. It really is time. It's time for America to come to grips with its past peacefully, and I think we can do that in this town. It's time we take down the symbols of Jim Crow that haunt our African American brothers and sisters and move those symbols to a museum where they belong. It's time that we let go of this dark chapter in our history. It's time to show empathy and do the right thing. It's well documented that these statues were erected throughout the South during the Jim Crow era as a figurative thumb in the eye to people of color. Now, I know that there's an injunction in place, but I want to know that my city council would at least consider taking action to determine if a court would reopen consideration of that injunction based on a change in circumstances, as your lawyer has indicated, would be one ground, or based on the fact that the injunction itself is a nullity because of the complete lack of standing of the UDC to bring the suit in the first place. And I ask that you please just take these views into consideration the next time this matter is brought before the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie Phelps, followed by Ronald Alexander.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jackie Phelps. I am here tonight mostly as myself, and I'll tell you why in a minute. First, I'd like to speak about my family's reaction to the Mouton statue in downtown Lafayette. My sister and my nephew, Zach, who's 16, live in Texas. I've lived here for about 10 years. I moved here from Austin, and I love it here, and this is my home now. I've often said to my sister that she might like living here too. It's less expensive to live here than Austin. I think that it would be better for her health, and she agrees with me, except for the fact that my nephew is black. And she will not consider bringing him here to live because she's afraid of racism and discrimination. We have sitting in our downtown a monument to racism and discrimination. If my nephew were here, his name is Zach, and he's a great football player and basketball player and golfer and every sport you can think of he's good at. And he loves his mama and he loves his dog. What do I tell that child if he were here with his mama, we were downtown, and he saw that? He'd know what it is. And what could I say to him except, Zach, I'm sorry that this is here. But my city government has not yet found the spine to challenge that injunction and take it down. And it's time. Like Kirk said, it's time. So that people like my sister and her African American child don't have to be afraid to visit me at my home in Lafayette. And what an embarrassment. What an absolute embarrassment that an on the surface, forward-thinking and progressive city like Lafayette, with all kinds of potential, has sitting in the middle of our downtown a statue to slavery, to racism. What an embarrassment that is. I would also like to take a second, and I would like to talk about Drag Queen Story Hour. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and we live by 7 principles, and I'm going to say some of them. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we're a part, and the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. My faith calls me, demands that I oppose, 1, the continued existence of that slavery statue downtown, and 2, the forces of close-mindedness and miseducation that would deny children the right. I am done. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you.
Ronald Alexander, followed by Mary Alex.
Easy, Mr. Prejean.
Good evening. My name is Ronald Alexander, and I live in the 4th District, Willow Street near Turlings High School and Good Hope Baptist Church. And I'm here for help. I have a problem with drainage in my neighborhood that was caused by an open ditch that was closed up. I get an excessive amount of water that comes into my property. I've called everybody in the city. I've gone to every avenue. Every time I call somebody, I speak to a secretary, I speak to an assistant, but nobody calls me back that can help me. So I understand that Lafayette has a process of getting things done. What is the process? I've lived where I live at for 16 years. For 15 years, I had no problem with the water until they closed the ditch up. Now, when I call the drainage department, I don't get calls back. I've been to the parish council's office, I don't get calls back. So what is the process? I'm looking for help.
Councilman Boudreaux.
Ronald, just for the record, we're trying to coordinate a meeting with about 11 people to go out to the site again and look at the issues. So I'm just going to go back over the history a little. That project, and I don't think this administration was here, and I don't know if Mr. Dubrock is actually here. That project was a request of the neighborhood because of the number of accidents that was happening with vehicles ending up in the ditch at that intersection because of the configuration of that corner. And the engineers within our department, those professionally trained people, designed a project to address a few issues.
that dated back quite some time. As you know, I've been out to your property at least twice. I've been in that area at least on this issue at least 10 times, visiting with different people at different occasions. The calls that you have made, I don't know, to Public Works, I'm not familiar with those, but the calls that you have made to my office, the last one I got was in request for an on-site meeting. So what I'm trying to do is that we're trying to coordinate not only my schedule, but at least 2 engineers, one being a supervisor from Public Works, the actual individuals who did the project, the architect who designed the project, as well as the construction company who built the project. So it has taken that amount of time to get those schedules together. But your calls have been returned. I have been to your home. I have walked that project with you, and that project has corrected other matters. So that's the response that's available to you tonight as it relates to that. And as soon as those schedules can be coordinated, because to go out with one and not the other really defeats the purpose, as soon as those schedules are coordinated, there will be a meeting out at the site again.
All I hear about is meetings. All the cans have been doing is just being kicked down the road. The process is slow. My home,
Very slow.
My home
I appreciate that.
My home, every day,
Yeah.
if we have a heavy rain, my home can flood. Yeah. I hear about meetings, I hear about this, that, but there's no action. Yeah. It's time for action.
Have I been to your place?
I saw you one time at my place.
Okay.
I have other people say they come.
Okay. I've responded to that location from the time that I took over that area.
I had an opportunity to meet Mr. The engineer from the project manager. He told me he didn't want to do the project because it would cause problems down the road. Well, it has caused problems down the road, and I called to talk to people. Nobody calls me back. You've been out to my property.
I would say that that's a misspeaking of an employee. I've never heard an employee of LCG say they did not want to do that project. With all due respect to Mr. Castile, that project started when that was in his district. Through reapportionment, that area became part of District 4. We was finally able to obtain the funding to get the project done, and there will be people who will be satisfied because they're not pulling trucks and cars out the ditches anymore. And if there's a legitimate issue that needs to be corrected, it needs to be corrected. But to say that the can has been kicked down the road and that no one has gone out is just untrue. Because I've been out there, we have the photos to prove it, and I've been out there many a time, so that's just not going to fly.
Well, maybe you've been out there. The problem still exists. I have not been contacted that you've been out there. Nobody's called me. I've left my phone number with everybody. Nobody calls me.
Well,
so you're telling me that you've been to the project, but you're not telling me that you're contacting me. Nobody's contacting me.
You just told me I went to your house once. We've talked on the phone more than one occasion.
I've never spoken to you on the phone.
Yeah, well we're going to disagree on that one.
Well, we can disagree on whatever. I need to know what's the process to get it done. My home is in the process can be flooded at any time. All I hear is talk. We need action.
I would suggest if you flood, file suit against the government. That's one thing you can consider.
I don't want to file suit.
Well, no, I'm just giving you an option. I'm giving you an option until that. The other thing that I'm here to tell you is that when we coordinate the schedules of all those individuals, there will be a meeting out there.
Let me ask you a question. When did this process start of coordinating the individuals?
About 3 weeks ago.
And in 3 weeks' time, I have not heard that this process is going to take place. When is the process going to take place?
When the schedules are coordinated, you'll be contacted.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're doing double talk. It's double talk.
Okay.
Double talk. Double talk.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Mary Alex, and she will be followed by Bill Leindecker.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mary Alex. My name is Mary Alex, and I'm from the District 51. I'm like the gentleman before here. I have questions about some of the policies that they have, and one of it is the abandoned properties who have grass that is extended and it doesn't get cut. It rained in this particular area for the last summer, and the grass grows higher and higher. It looks like you're living in another country because it looks so bad. And I want to know how I can get anybody to cut this grass on a more regular basis so that it can be cut And if it can't be cut, if they can do like an emergency grass cutting, like y'all do for the hurricanes, they have emergency food stamp issues. There should be something in place for that. And I would like to know who could give me an answer, because I've called all the city offices. I'm on the list to be having the grass cut next door to me. But in the meantime, it could be anything in the grass. There could be snakes, there could be rodents, everything. And this is considered living in the city of Lafayette.
What district, ma'am?
District 51.
51.
Of
Yeah.
District 3.
Yes, yes. Is Mr. Dubrock here? No. Can you come up, Mr. Dubrock, please?
Yes, sir. Mark Dubrock, Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Dubrock, I had spoke with Ms. Ellick before the meeting, and I told her that we had a meeting on yesterday concerning tall grass. And that's a problem in the city, just about everywhere, with all the rain we've been having. And there's just a problem with tall grass. And I think you and I had a conversation about maybe a year ago, and I think the grass was cut.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're still having problems, but not your grass, but next door to your house or across the street. And the reason why I'm calling Mr. Dubrock up is so you can kind of talk about our meeting we had yesterday, how we're trying to address situations like hers and other people that's listening and at home or here that might have some concerns like that.
Well, we met for about